So it's all based on this principle. So if you look at this picture, does anybody specifically stand out in the picture? Anybody see anybody? The guy on the phone, right? So why is that? We have this thing that operates in our subconscious called the negativity bias. Anybody heard of the negativity bias before? You probably all start to think of somebody, which is a really interesting thing too. As soon as you say negativity bias, you can kind of imagine somebody that you think of like that. But it's actually all of us. So evolution, when we were evolving, has anybody seen the movie The Croods? Yeah, a couple people with kids or just cartoon buffs. So the movie The Croods is all about evolution. And the main character, the father of the caveman family, it's his job to keep them safe. Because if you're not safe, you die, right? You get eaten. There's all sorts of things out there. You get a bad cold or you get an infected wound, you die. So everything in our evolution in caveman times, for the lack of a better phrase, but in caveman times, it was all about just surviving. And then, so the traits that are most common of survivors are the ones that get passed along. So a colleague of mine uses the example that if you were the really happy, bubbly person and you missed out on a predator and then got eaten, your really bubbly, happy trait didn't necessarily make it along. But the ones who were the most successful are the ones who were keen to what's wrong in the environment. So they heard the branch snap and they identified the predators and got safe faster. So they have this survival instinct that we now call the negativity bias. And this is a great example. How does the negativity bias play out in today's world? So if you've ever posted a picture of yourself or a comment on Facebook, and you get this big long of people who comment, a big long list of people who comment on it, and maybe 15 of them are really positive. They can get a new haircut. Oh, your haircut looks great. Haircut looks awesome. I love your bangs. But then you get one person, your aunt comes on and she says, I hate it, right? It looks terrible. So you had 15 comments that were positive and one crazy aunt who says she hates your bangs. And who do you focus on? What's the thing that you remember, right? Another example is like at a party. You go to a party and you have all sorts of positive interactions at the party, but then you have one negative one or you have a disagreement with somebody, and what do you go home thinking about? Even still, the next day, what do you think about in the morning? You think about the negative things. So we're pre-wired to think or to identify the negative and focus more of our attention on the negative. But what's happened is everything else has changed. So even though we evolved slowly, everything in our environments has evolved super quickly. So it's not as dangerous as it was 5,000 years ago. But we've only evolved a small increment in comparison to how much the world has evolved around us. So we don't need the negativity bias to the same extent that we did to keep us alive then. We still need it, it serves a function, but not to the same extent. So what we're really trying to do is overcome this negativity bias and reprogram how our brains operate. So there's this old-fashioned way of thinking, and it's partly true, but we used to treat it as if it were absolutely true. And if you worked hard, you would have success, and if you had success, you'd be happy. And what that means, it ends up being what they call the hedonic treadmill, where we put happiness off into the future. And we continually thinking, if I succeed, if I get this, then I'll be happy. But when we get this, what do? We need something else, right? So I get my first car, it's a used car. Mine was a 1986 Topaz. As soon as I got my car, like 2 days later, right, all I could think about is what car am I going to get next? If we pleasure delay forever, you'll always put your happiness off in the future and think you need to go through this ladder. It's actually quite the opposite. Where if we focus our energies on being happy, that we actually are more likely to be successful and on different and more important measurements, and then we work hard because we're doing what we love. So it's kind of backwards. And in a lot of cases, it's absolutely backwards. So what we want to do is try and flip that around and focus on what makes us happy earlier in life. Get the skills, the psychological skills, learn to build our environments to bring us more happiness, because if we do that, we perform way better. Absolutely way better. And then we work hard because, has anybody heard the phrase, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life? It's a pretty strong overgeneralization, but there's some truth to it. And it's not whether you do have it or not, it's whether you think you have it. So self-efficacy in students is a really important one. Because if they don't feel like they have the traits to succeed, then they operate in more of a state of fear because they don't feel like they have the resources. But it's also really interesting because, when you wake up and you're having a terrible day and you think of the day's, sometimes you think of the day's terrible, right? Some people don't think that they can interact with and change things. And we measure it for emotional efficacy. So do you think that you can change your mood, or are you just slave to your mood? Do you think that you can change your intelligence? So can you teach an old dog new tricks? Or is there this finite time to learn, and once it's over, you can't do it? And we find that when people have really low levels of self-efficacy, everything else goes down with it because they've got this fixed mindset. And if you can't change things, why would you try?